Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Fishing for a Reason podcast, where we talk everything related to fishing, hiking, the outdoors, and all the magical memories that you can create with your favorite humans, whether it's on the water or in nature on land somewhere. So, today we're actually going to talk about one of my favorite things to eat. And it's funny, I'm pretty sure I say that with every species. But every time there's an opener with the species that you are able to target, you're just like, oh, I cannot wait to dig into this. And it's crab, Dungeness crab. And if you're like me, I just cannot. Actually, this is a really good question. So, for those of you that are tuning in, whether you're on Facebook, whether you are on YouTube, or if you're listening to our podcast, I would love to know, how many dungies can you eat before you get sick of them or full? I would love to know that answer because I'm not actually sure I've officially calculated, but the first crab of the season, I can put down a lot of dungies. I mean, probably at least 3 or 4. They're so good. They're so good. And it's so satisfying when you work to eat them. Okay, second question. Don't judge me. How many of you eat dungies with a crab cracker? Let me know. And then how many of you eat them and crack them with your teeth? Sorry, Mom, but it's true. Just straight up with the teeth, like a heathen. That's how we eat them. But I would love to know, how do you guys crack your crab? How do you prepare your crab? My favorite way to eat them is I always bring the pot with us when we take the boat out to go grab crab pots. And then I will scoop up some seawater, maybe like half a big pot full. And I cook them directly in seawater, no additional anything. To me, it's the best way to eat them. It's absolutely the best. And yes, sometimes we'll add butter or a little cocktail sauce, but not the first round of crab. First round of crab is just eaten straight up. And if you know, you know, there is nothing sweeter and more delicious than fresh Dungeness out of the Puget Sound, Salish Sea, San Juan Islands, wherever you're tuning into. So anyway, let me know. I digress. But welcome to the Fishing for a Reason podcast, where we're going to talk a little bit about the sciencey fun of dungies that'll make you a more effective crabber in the future. So I did a little research on these guys. And as you guys know, if you have been tuning into this podcast, I love to learn about the why behind the animals and the fish that we're targeting, so that we can not only be more effective anglers, but also understand and appreciate the critters that we're catching, because they're amazing. They're absolutely incredible. And we're so lucky and so blessed to be able to go out and pull fresh dinner out of the water and share it with our favorite humans. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we dig into that, we do have a online community that is for anglers that want to be surrounded by other like-minded anglers and also accelerate their fishing success. So if you're looking to fill your catch record card, whether it's crab, halibut, lingcod, salmon, shrimp, whatever it may be, we have a portal where we have full online courses. We currently have halibut and salmon fishing course in full. And then we do monthly seminars inside of that community where we all hop on Zoom. We learn about a specific topic. We ask questions. Sometimes it's just fishing reports and Q&A, really what the members are looking for in that month. We cater to what's open and what's going on. So if you're looking for a deeper dive or just a whole bunch of maps and recipes that you can get your hands on to be more effective on the water faster, this is a really great community. We have people inside of that community that go from literally no experience and they're catching their very first fish, all the way up to 50 plus years, have been fishing for decades, but always are excited to be inside of a group of humans that want to learn and grow together. And that's exactly what this is. So if that is something that sounds interesting to you, email us at support@anglersunlimited.co. That's .co, and send us catch more fish. And we will get you a link to find out more about that community and see if it's the right fit for you. We are going to be we still have the doors open for that probably through a couple months this summer. And then we're going to shut it down as we build out that library of content and really serve our members behind the scenes. So hop in while it's still open. We still haven't quite decided when we're going to close the doors, but that will be coming up. So with that, let's dive right into our awesome topic today. We're going to talk about dungies. And As you guys know, the Dungeness crab is an iconic Pacific Northwest shellfish, and understanding its life cycle and habits can greatly improve your crabbing success and appreciation, like we talked about. So, what we're going to do is talk about some action oriented things that you can explore related to the biology of dungies, as well as the timing. Right now, we're in late summer when this is being recorded, depending on when you're listening to it, but how you know, like, what different techniques you can use. Why did you go out one day and your pots were totally empty in the same spot versus when you went out there the day before it was totally loaded? So, we're going to talk about all those different things so that you can become a more effective crabber if you have limited time on the water. But crab have a complex life cycle that actually influences when and how aggressively they feed. So, key factors for you guys to understand is that mating occurs in spring and early summer. The females will actually molt their exoskeleton or their shell in order to mate. And so, if you've ever heard the term soft shell crab, that's because crab cannot actually grow out, like their shell and their exoskeleton does not grow with them. Therefore, when they get to a point of needing to get bigger, they have to literally shed it and they come out of it. So if you've ever been like walking on the beach or like on the coast, and you see these little crab, what looks like crab carcasses, it's actually not a crab carcass, especially if there's no full animal there. You'll notice it's actually a crab exoskeleton that's been shed. So next time when you see empty crab shells around in the beach, it's probably not because the crab was killed. It's probably because it's shed that shell. So take a look at it and enjoy that because it's kind of fun. So anyway, the females will molt in late spring around April and June. And then male crabs actually molt later in the summer. So right now, they're going to be molting more by late July in our area. And so that's why when we are crabbing, you're always encouraged to check for soft shell crab. So molting has two big implications for summer crabbing. The soft shell crabs reduce feeding. So right after they shed, dungies have this new and soft shell, and it takes about 2 months for that thing to harden and fill out with the actual muscle tissue. So a freshly molted soft shell crab is going to feel flexible. So when you pick one up, even when you grab one, like you know how you grab them from the back, you can feel it, especially on the underside. And the best way to check is to pinch the back leg. So you'll see those 4 legs on each side. The one furthest back, which will help you avoid being pinched, just give it a quick squeeze. If you can feel a flexibility there, that's a soft shell crab. It's not worth keeping because, like we just talked about, the muscle tissue has not actually fully formed when they're soft shell. So if you do accidentally keep a soft shell crab unknowingly and you boil it, you're going to see like no meat in there anyway. So you're not going to get enough yield for that animal. You might as well toss them back in the water. It's illegal to keep them anyway, but people do it by mistake. I want to give you the why behind it. They need to actually mature. So not very often are you going to be finding those crab inside of your pots as soft shell because as we just discussed, they don't feed as aggressively as the hard shell crab. So ideally, you're not going to find a ton of those guys inside of your pots, but it's always great to check because they do sneak in there here and there. And the males are the ones that are going to be in that soft shell state during this time in the summer. One other thing that I thought was really interesting is crabs can live up to about 13 years old. They kind of average around 10 years old. And they will molt their shell up to 6 times a year when they're in their young juvenile stage. But as they get older, they only molt 1 time per year. So typically when we're catching crab, they are between 3 years old and 10 years old. That range is the crab that we are usually harvesting based on our legal size limit inside of our pots. So little food for thought there. The other consequence of the molt cycle is crabs will tend to eat less, and that causes them to be less interested in bait. So during that spring mating season specifically, for example, Dungeness crab, especially the males guarding the females, are going to fast and slow their feeding. So that'll make them hard to attract during that time, which we don't fish during that time. So it's not a concern, at least here in the Area 7 region. But in late July, males will be preparing to shed, and recovering from shed might similarly be less voracious, as we talked about before. The upside is once those crabs have hardened, they are hungry and they're going to be feeding aggressively to rebuild their body mass. So that's why we're going to find those guys in our pots in late summer. And more male crabs will have completed molting by August and will be hungry. And so as the summer season goes on, you're just going to see your crab pots fill up more and more and more. So let's talk about some of the habitat preferences, especially in the San Juan Islands for Dungeness crab. These guys are found in intertidal zones down to considerable depths, but they have a clear habitat preference. You're going to find these in sandy or muddy soft bottom areas where they can find abundant marine vegetation such as eelgrass. Eelgrass meadows and mudflats, they are a really great food source for the crab, as well as an area for them to hide and cover themselves during daylight hours. So crab will feed on clams, worms. They'll feed on other crab, like other soft-shell crab. They will feed on carcasses of dead fish, carcasses of bait fish. So crabs are just opportunistic feeders, and they're going to hunt around for that thing that's rotting or something that's an easy opportunity to consume, and they're going to mow down on it. Crabbing on muddy and sandy bottoms in like 30 to 60 feet of water is a really good target depth. You can catch these guys much deeper as well, and you can drop your pots into 100 plus feet of water. But know that it isn't necessary that you have to go super deep, especially in the summertime, to get these guys. You can catch them in pretty shallow areas, which makes it pretty easy and pretty fun to go crabbing. The other thing that's interesting to note is crab will use habitat differently by their life stage and season. So young juveniles will settle in very shallow estuaries and eelgrass beds where they can find a lot of shelter from predators and from cannibalistic larger crabs, which you just talked about. Adults, on the other hand, range more widely. They're most abundant from the low intertidal areas down to, they can be between 170 to 300 feet. So that's why some of the big commercial guys they'll crab really deep, but they also will crab pretty dang shallow. So you'll see, actually, when you see commercial crab pots, they're kind of littered all over the same places that recreational guys crab. Adults move into shallower nearshore waters in the spring and summer because of breeding. So in Washington, adult dungies migrate into shallower bays, sometimes even bays that are just a few feet deep. And that's why our crabbing season in Marine Area 7 doesn't actually open up until mid-July. It's to protect that breeding season and sustain the species. So one study in Alaska found crabs in about 30 feet of water during the mating months and mostly deeper in the fall or winter. So like that 50-foot deep line or deeper. So that's something to think about because we usually do get a winter crabbing season. You want to go a little bit deeper during the winter. So what does that mean for right now? For late July crabbing in the San Juan Islands, as an example, it means legal crabs are still hanging out around the shallower feeding grounds in the summer before they retreat to those deeper areas. So if you see a nice little shallow bay, throw your pots in it. You never know. You might just find a little honey hole that not everybody has discovered, which makes it a lot of fun. So it is important to note that because we have a lot of people in our area and crabbing season is concentrated, it does mean popular, easy access spots can get picked over. You can notice that when there is a lot of pressure in one area, it does seem like over time, the crabbing can get a little more challenging or a little more difficult. And over time, you'll also see, okay, now you're pulling your pots and you're just pulling up a bunch of females or sublegal crab. So if that's the case, move your pots. It's time to move them. Don't be afraid to move your gear if you start pulling up smaller crab. Sometimes just moving a couple hundred yards can mean a really big difference from an empty pot or one that's brimming with keepers. So let's talk about crab feeding behavior, time, and diet composition. When and what dungies eat is important for you to know so you can improve your crabbing strategy. They are opportunistic predators, like we talked about, and scavengers, meaning they're going to eat just about anything they can grab and munch on from the seafloor. So studies of their diets have found they commonly feed on bivalves like clams and mussels, small fish carcasses, small fish, marine worms, shrimp, and other crustaceans. And like we said, other crabs. So especially during molting season, when they're soft shell, they'll munch on each other, which is awesome. This broad diet is good news for crabbers because it means that dungies will be attracted to a variety of different bait. One of the most popular types of bait that people use is chicken, specifically with the skin on it, because it's oily and puts out a very protein rich scent trail, which does indeed draw in the crab. A lot of guys will also use salmon carcasses or salmon heads that we always save ours. So after salmon season or during salmon season, when we fillet our fish, we will keep the heads and the backbone that we do not, and we just kind of crunch it up, put it, I call it a crab sickle. You just put it in a freezer bag and freeze it, and then pull it out when you want to go out crabbing and zip tie it inside of your pot, which is super great, or put it inside of the middle bait container, depending on how your pot is set up. We also use chicken like crazy. So it's really cheap bait that you can get in the grocery store. And some places, actually, if you go talk to the butcher at the store, they'll have like discards from processing chicken, and you can get some of that for a really reasonable price. So it never hurts to ask if somebody has crab bait, especially if you're in a fishing town. So while dungy crabs will snack anytime, it is also important to note that most of their feeding activity is going to follow the tidal rhythms and the daylight. So this is really interesting. Many crabbers and biologists report that crab tend to be more active at night. It's because under the cover of darkness, these guys can leave their hiding spots. So what they'll do is they'll actually bury themselves in the sand and silt or mud when the tides are ripping, as well as when it's a super bright, clear day, because predators can see them better. So it's their way to camouflage. But at night, that's when they're coming out to play. So a lot of times, guys are going to soak their pots overnight. If you come at first light to pick your pots, you'll just notice they're crazy full and loaded with keeper crab. So that's something really important to note too. Sometimes if you leave them soaking too long, these guys can get in and out. And you may have just missed your window to pick your crab pots. Tides also play a critical role in crab feeding behavior. In areas like the San Juans, where we live here out in Marine Area 7, and I look out there because the water is right there. When we have a big tidal exchange, as an example, yesterday, we had some ripping tides. It was a -2, and we had a pretty short window to drop the crab pots. And I think in the area we were dropping, it was ripping like 4 point something knots. And we did not yield as many crab as we typically do in that spot. So that very likely could have been just being in a rush and the tides affecting our crab success that specific day, which is actually why I was inspired to create this podcast. I was like, you know what? It's really interesting. We have slayed crab this year, and this is the one day we have not. And is there a reason that we can actually scientifically figure out as to why, especially when you've been crabbing in the same area? So I found that to be a fun opportunity to learn, because nature is never consistent. The only thing consistent about the wild outdoors is that it's always changing and adapting, and we have to change and adapt and learn from it and with it. And that's something I love about it so much. So anyway, it inspired this podcast. So if you've ever heard of like a soaker tide, which just means there's not a lot of current running, or when tide slows down, that's when it's easiest for critters in the water to move around, which makes a lot of sense. So crab are going to be more active when the tide starts to slack, because it's easier for them to move around. Also, the carcasses are probably going to settle easier on the sea floor, and they're going to be able to find what they need to eat. So those are going to be some really good times. Like if you are fishing with a crab ring, timing the tides and current changes, which is when the water starts to slow down before it goes the opposite direction, knowing those times is going to be most effective for you, especially if you have a crab ring to pull up some crab. So using the tide chart is really important. In practical terms, target those smaller exchange days, especially if you have a tight window for crabbing. Mind you, if you're soaking your pots overnight, you'll hit a good tide at some point because it goes in and it goes out. We can count on that, right? So to summarize the feeding behavior insights of crab, use strong scented baits that align with the crab's natural diet. So like fish, clams, squid, or even chicken, which is not its natural diet, but it works like a freaking charm. Time your efforts when crab are actively feeding. So an overnight soak with pulling your pots in the morning is best, as well as those nice soaker tides or tide slacks. So you're fishing on the crab schedule, which will greatly improve your ability to pull dungies out of the water so you can have the best meal ever. So let's talk about movement patterns and seasonal behavior of crab because I think it's so cool. Like, what do they do? Do they just hang out in the same area all the time? Are they migrating? I had no idea. So I did a little bit of research on this, and they actually don't stay in one spot. They move daily with the tides and seasonally with life cycle needs. So appreciating these movement patterns are going to help you meet the crabs where they are when you are actually fishing. So at high tide, especially at night, crabs could wander into more shallow water because we do have a pretty good tidal exchange here, several feet. And so by them moving into those shallower areas as the tide comes in, they're hunting for clams and other food. They've been observed to forage daily in lower intertidal waters when conditions permit. Then, as the tide recedes or the daylight comes, many crab will retreat into the deeper water for cover. Seasonally, we discussed about how adults migrate into shallower water in the spring to breed and deeper in the winter. It's also worth noting that these guys have a temperature preference. Dungies thrive in water ranging from 37 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, according to WDFW's website. In midsummer, the shallow and shelter bays can warm up beyond this, so crab will stay a little bit deeper depending on how shallow that bay is, or into currents bringing cooler water. So overall, our takeaway is that crabs are on the move, following food and favorable conditions. So if your usual spot is actually not yielding results, the crab might be following the tide or food source somewhere else nearby, chasing what the currents have been pushed around. So don't be afraid to relocate your pots. If you drop your pots and you pull them like you did the day before and there's blanks, they could just be a few hundred yards away. So don't be afraid to just relocate your gear and start watching for patterns. We always talk about making sure that you are tracking what happens. What was the tide doing? What was the current doing? What were the weather conditions? And what kind of limits did you pull at that location? So we're always tracking data of our favorite crabbing spots to determine the more data that you track, especially not only your successes, but your losses when things don't go great, the more effective you're going to be as an angler out on the water. And we are all short on time. The one thing that we cannot get back. So if you can maximize your time on the water, it just makes it a whole more fun for everybody. So make sure you're tracking all of that stuff. We always just hit a spot on our sounder where our crab pot is. A, so you can find it again. But B, if it goes well, it's something that we track and make note of. So let's bring it all together so you have some action items next time you go hit the crabbing grounds. Time your tides. Plan your crabbing around slack tides and gentle soaker tide exchanges. Otherwise, just drop your pots in on a Thursday and pick them up on a Monday. If you are just crabbing the whole window, we can crab between Thursday and Monday here in Marine Area 7. Make sure you're checking your pots after those ideal tide times or first light so you can maximize what's inside of your pot. Make sure you're crabbing on the crab's schedule because we know that they are nocturnal in nature. You can have an advantage with doing an overnight soak rather than maybe doing a full day soak. So if it works out in your schedule, drop the pots the night before and pick them up in the morning, and you will likely be more effective. Also, select prime habitat when you are crabbing those muddy and sandy bottoms, ranging from 30 to 130 feet deep. And please note, make sure you have enough line on your crab pots and always use leaded line. If you have been boating long enough, you may have encountered the infamous yellow floating line on a prop, and that's really not fun. So highly encourage everyone who is crabbing, use leaded line. It makes it better for everybody. It keeps those lines down where they need to be and not floating awkwardly where they can get wrapped up in somebody's prop. Derelict crab pots. I always want to mention this because it's infamous, especially if you're crabbing in an area where we have some pretty ripping currents. Make sure you weight your pots. You can throw a down rigger ball in the middle bait container, and that will keep your pot nice and secure. You can also use like old window weights and zip tie those to your pot, but you need to make sure your pots are weighted. The currents are strong and they will take your pot off to another land, never to be seen again if you do not weight them. If you can't find your pots, which happens to the best of us, it does happen and it's unfortunate. Those derelict pots are actually pretty hazardous to our ecosystem. what you can do if you have your pots go missing, there's a couple ways. Go to WDFW's website and you can search WDFW derelict crab pot and it'll pull right up. There is a website called derelictgear.org put on by the Northwest Straits website, and you can report that you missed your pot and where it was missing from, and they actually go out and find and recover pots, which is really, really great. You can also report it online on WDFW's website, and we'll make sure to link all of this in the show notes, or you can call. There's a number to call for WDFW or the Northwest Straits. And if you tell on yourself, you will not get in trouble because you are doing the right thing by making sure to report. So as much as it sucks, it's even more of a problem if you just let it go and it becomes something that is on the seafloor that shouldn't be there, potentially trapping and killing crab for no reason. So please make sure that you report any of your lost fishing gear. These guys will go find it and recover it. So that's a win for everybody in that situation. So with that, thank you guys so much for tuning into the Fishing for a Reason podcast. And if you like episodes like these and want a little bit more of nerdage, please let me know in the comments any topics you want us to do a little research on, and we will bring it to you. So with that, have a beautiful week, and we will catch you next week, same time, same place, same channel on the Fishing for a Reason podcast. Thanks, everybody. Have a beautiful day.